Texas Governor Rick Perry.
Governor Perry, by your own admission, you're not a great debater. You have said as much and downplayed debating skills in general. But if you were to become your party's nominee, you would be going up against an accomplished debater in Barack Obama. There are many in this audience tonight, sir, who fear that possibility and don't think you're up to the fight.
Well,
allay them of their concerns.
I want to share something with you. That as each one of these debates, I'm kind of getting where I like these debates. As a matter of fact, I hope Obama and I debate a lot, and I'll get there early. And we will get it on, and we will talk about our differences, which are great. I'll talk about what we've done in the state of Texas. I'll talk about passing a balanced budget amendment to the United States Congress. I'll talk about having the type of part-time Congress that I think Americans are ready for. And, you know, there are a lot of people out there, I understand it, you know, there are a lot of folks that said Tim Tebow wasn't going to be a very good NFL quarterback. There are people that stood up and said, well, he doesn't have the right throwing mechanisms, or he doesn't, you know, he's not playing the game right. And, you know, he won 2 national championships, and that looked pretty good. We were the national champions in job creation back in Texas. And so, but am I ready for the next level? Let me tell you, I hope I am the Tim Tebow of the Iowa caucuses.
If you're president, as is the case now, and you're at loggerheads with one chamber of Congress, how would you handle this situation?
After 3 years, you would think that this president had learned how to work in Washington, D.C. If there's ever been a greater example of on-the-job training, this is it. And it couldn't have been at a worse time for America. We need a president who has that governing executive experience, someone who understands how to work with both sides of the aisle. Frankly, we should never have gotten to this point at all. The idea that he walked away from the work at hand, and we had a super committee that was put into place that was going to fail on its face. That's the type of leadership that this president has been an absolute failure at, and the type that I've been working at as the governor of Texas for the last 11 years.
Governor Perry, you said the only way to stop our spending problem is to get Congress to stop spending. Quoting you, sir, you said, I vetoed 82 bills in my first year as governor of Texas. I have a record of keeping spending under control. But as Texas Agriculture Commissioner, you oversaw a loan guarantee program that, as the Austin American-Statesman reported at the time, had so many defaults that the state had to stop guaranteeing bank loans to startups in the agribusiness and eventually bailed out the program with taxpayer money. So aren't you guilty of the same behavior you rail against as a presidential candidate?
Well, 2 things. Number 1, don't believe everything you read in the Austin American-Statesman. And the second side of it is that we had that program put in place, and the state did not bail out. Those programs worked as they were supposed to work. Just like in any bank or any business, you're going to have some that fail. But I want to go back and talk about, just a second, the issue of where we had a big back and forth about whether Newt was involved in untoward activity or not. And I'll be real honest with you. The issue we ought to be talking about on this stage is how you really overhaul Washington, D.C. And the idea that you can't tell the difference between lobbying and consulting. The idea that we have Congress stay in there as many days as they do and the salary that they have. That's the reason I've called for a part-time Congress. Cut their pay in half, cut their time in Washington in half, cut their staff in half, send them home, let them get a job like everybody else back home has, and live within the laws of which they pass. We do that, and you pass a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution, and the conversations that we've been having up here will be minor.
By the way, Governor, they worked 151 days last year. How much more would constitute part-time?
I would suggest to you maybe 140 days every other year like we do in Texas.
With just a name, favorite Supreme Court justice. Supreme Court
I'll try
justice.
to be as quickly as I can, but when I talk about overhauling Washington, D.C., one of the things I talk about, besides a part-time Congress, is no longer having lifetime terms for the federal bench. I think that is one of the ways that you keep these unaccountable legislators with robes from trying to dictate to the rest of us. And I would say, you know, you pick Alito, Roberts, or Thomas, pick one.
Given the grim details of the recent United Nations report on the Syrian regime killing and torturing its own people, thousands of people said to be killed at the hands of the Assad regime. At what point should the U.S. consider military intervention there?
Well, I've already called for an overfly zone, no-fly zone over Syria already. They are Iran's partner. They are attached at the hip, and we have to stand firm with our ally in that region, Israel. There needs to be no space between the United States and Israel, and this administration has absolutely bungled. It is the most muddled foreign policy that I can ever remember in my lifetime. Whether it was in 2009 when we had the opportunity, either covertly, overtly, or other ways, of helping the Iranian citizens as they were trying to overthrow that repressive regime, whether it was working with Mubarak and trying to have a moderate to come in and replace him, whether it was leading from behind, as we've seen in Libya, and now we've seen this president, as Mitt and Newt have both talked about, asking the Iranians to give us back that drone. What we should have done was one of two things: we either destroy it or we retrieve it. He took a third route, which was the worst and the weakest, and that is to do nothing.
Governor Perry, you have railed against the special treatment afforded Cylinder as of the other candidates here tonight, and particularly the tax code incentives for green technologies and allowances that have been made for this industry. But as Texas governor, you have afforded the same attention to the oil industry. Back in 2003, you signed a bill that reduced the tax paid by some natural gas companies that have helped them reap since better than $7 billion in tax savings. So I guess what I'm saying is, are you guilty of the same behavior as governor, favoring an industry that you claim this president has, favoring the green industry?
Today's the 220th anniversary of the signing of the Bill of Rights. And one of those, the 10th Amendment, I like a lot. And the reason is because that's how our founding fathers saw this country set up, where that we had these laboratories of innovation. It should be in the purview and the decision-making process of a state, if they want to put tax policies in place that helps make them be more competitive. We did it not only for the oil and gas industry, but we also did it for the alternative industry, alternative energy industry, and the wind industry. They came in droves, made Texas the #1 wind energy producing state in the nation. But government shouldn't be picking winners and losers from Washington, D.C. That's the difference. If in the states, I'll promise you, Terry Branstad in this state, he knows how to put tax policy, regulatory policy in place to make his state be more competitive. And you need 50 states out there competing with each other and Washington out of their hair.
In the wake of the failed federal gun tracking program, Operation Fast and Furious, so far, there is no clear proof that Mr. Holder knew about the controversial aspects of this operation, and he points out that he actually helped stop it once it came to his attention. Are you and other Republicans politicizing this issue as General Holder claims?
If I'm the President of the United States and I find out that there is an operation like Fast and Furious and my Attorney General didn't know about it, I would have him resign immediately. You cannot. The President of the United States comes to El Paso, Texas earlier this year and proclaims that the border of Texas and Mexico, the U.S. border with Mexico, is safer than it's ever been. Well, let me tell you, I've been dealing with this issue for 11 years. I've sent Texas Ranger recon teams there. Our law enforcement men and women face fire from across the border or in the U.S. side from these drug cartels. It is not safe there. Our country is at jeopardy. If we're going to be able to defend America from Iran, from Hezbollah, from Hamas, that are using Mexico as a border, as a way to penetrate into the southern part of the United States. Venezuela has the largest Iranian embassy in the world there. We know what's going on. It is time for this country to have a real conversation about a Monroe Doctrine again, like we did against the Cubans in the 60s.
The question is, how do you balance, on the one hand, trying to win the nomination, with, on the other hand, not weakening the eventual nominee to the point where he or she is less electable than President Obama? Down the road. Senator Perry.
Yeah. There's matter of fact, I think that was the Republican chairman, not Ronald Reagan, that actually said that.
Oh, he espoused it. That's
right.
what I said.
Indeed he did. But there's an NFL player, his name doesn't come to mind, but he said if you don't get your tail kicked every now and then, you're not playing at a high enough level. And I just want to give all of you all credit for letting me play at a high enough level and for training me the way that you have.